There are a lot of challenges that we face, and a lot of challenges that our ancestors had to face throughout history, especially here in recent times within the last 500 years or so. Our people have gone through some great changes and really have faced some huge challenges that when you look at everything that was against them, it's really a wonder that our people are still here today. The disease, the government, the United States government actually had bounties on Indian people's heads. You know, there were governmental policies later that tried to get rid of us or take our land from us.
I am 91 years of age now, and I was brought up by my grandparents, Yellowtail, and his wife, Lizzie Yellowtail. And at that time, when I was born in 1913, it was only about 30 years old, 30, 35 years when the Crows were moved to this part of the reservation, and reservation life started actually in 1884. They were settled here, and the Secretary of Interior issued Secretary's orders of 1884 prohibiting the Indians from practicing all activities related to their culture, dances, powwows, and singing, and things like that. So they were afraid to even put on their native costumes. They were told to wear over a white man's outfit, start becoming a white man.
In my grandmother's generation, they were taken from the home, and if the parents didn't send their kids to school, they were arrested. And the police would actually come out to the homes and take the kids from their homes and take them to the boarding school. And in the boarding schools, they weren't able to see the way that traditional families lived. They weren't able to see the way that you interact with children, the way that you raise children, the way that you teach them these values. I think that the government their intentions were to help the Indian people to become more a part of the melting pot of America. And so they wanted to teach Indian children not to speak the language, to not be a part of the ceremonies, to turn away from all of these things so that they could become a part of the rest of American society. And it was real detrimental to our people because that's who they were and that's what they were. And by teaching them that those things weren't good was basically telling them that they weren't good. And so it was real devastating to our people.
So that's what they took. This is what they found to be the most powerful weapon, is to take our spirituality, our cultural base, our language, our songs, all of that. And there's an incredible wealth of knowledge about who you are as an individual, who you are as a family, as a culture, all in there.
If our children today, if they can realize that these things are good and that they're from the Creator, and that we can have and be a part of American society, but still hold on to our values and still hold on to our teachings, I think that's something that I would try to get across to the children.
Well, I know that it's very difficult for young people, American Indian people or indigenous people living today, to try to figure out, well, do I follow the path of my elders, or do I follow the path of what I'm learning in school, or which way should I go? And I understand that that can be very, very confusing. And also what has happened to indigenous people historically, with not only federal government policy, but also the role of churches, stripping us away from our normal religious traditions and cultural traditions. We find ourselves now in a situation in America where we have people now who are understanding what has happened. They've studied the history, they've looked at what has missionization done to us. By that I mean missionaries coming to our reservations or trying to find us and converting us away from our Indian ways into being more like mainstream society. And that always creates a problem because we have our own inner voice. And then that little voice inside of us is telling us, well, you know, you're really Indian, so why are you going that way? But yet there's so much pressure in American society that that's the way we should go because we're also Americans. So it's been very, very difficult, I think, for not only the young people, but also middle-aged Native people and our elders to continue to hang on to those traditions.
I had lost my daughter and her husband. They had 4 kids. So I moved back here with the grandchildren to raise them here in Saskatchewan on the Poundmaker Reserve, or Poundmaker First Nation. Because we have the sweat lodge right there. We don't have one in LA. We have our sun dances. We have other ceremonies. We have our drum there. We have our songs. We have our pipe there. And I chose to live here with my relatives, the rest of the Cree, because I feel that my grandchildren need to know who they are. They need to retain their value system. They need to know and retain our belief systems, our worldview, as Cree, First Nations people here in North America.
When you think about the values and the stories that are the values and the lessons that are taught through the stories, it teaches us about being honest. It teaches us about not stealing, about being truthful and not, and always being in control of our passions. And a lot of those stories were told through the coyote stories. And the coyote was used as an example of how not to be. The coyote, in a lot of these stories, a lot of bad always happened to him because of the wrong choices that he made, doing the wrong thing. And so we were taught not to do, how not to be. And then we were also given an example. In a lot of those same stories, the wolf was used, and the wolf emulated the good qualities, and the opposite of the coyote. And so we were taught values. We were taught good things through these stories. A lot of these stories are also passed with our ceremonies and taught to us through that.
It wasn't professors or teachers that helped me get to the place where I am now. It was my elders. It was my father, a man who went to the 3rd grade but understood our traditions. It was my uncles and my aunts. And yes, in some ways it was also my mother, although she was raised in a convent and was very Catholic and was forced to give up her Indian traditions. Don't feel that there's no hope. Don't stop to think that the only way that you can deal with the pain that you feel, and I know what that pain is because I have felt it all my life, there are ways that you can do that. And the key to that solution is knowing what your people have done all their life, and they've survived for centuries, you know. Yes, they've had to give up a lot of things, but that knowledge is still in their heart and in their mind, and you should be able to learn from that. Be proud of who you are, and if you don't know who you are, because a lot of us grow up that way, There are ways that you can find out who you are. And the more you find out about who you are, the more proud you will be. And that will open up roads and ways for you to find your way through this. So it takes work on a spiritual level, it takes work on an intellectual level by studying, and it takes work on a physical level, your body. You have to take care of your body, you have to keep it healthy.
It's so important for each young person in North America to try and learn, if they don't know already, their language. Like the Cree language, when you listen to it, there's no other language in the world that sounds like Cree. If you listen to Lakota, same thing. You go to any country in the world, you don't hear that language. The Apache, the other languages, you don't hear them anywhere in the world. What you hear are drum and the singing, the music. There's no music anywhere in the world like ours. So all of these were gifts from the Creator.
Consider this. There are many of our elders who were raised by their grandparents. People in our communities who are 65, 75, maybe 80, raised by their grandparents. Their grandparents were raised by their grandparents. In 3 or 4 generational skips, you can connect to the people in the Buffalo Days. You could know the war deeds of some of our most famous warriors. You could know the medicines of some of our lady medicine people just by asking your grandmother, who was raised by her grandmother, who was raised by her grandmother. And sometimes you think, well, Grandma, it's a long way from the Buffalo Days, or a long way from the days of our strongest traditions. But it isn't. And you yourself, if you're raised by your grandparents, you have a window into a world of our most beautiful traditions, our most useful and strong traditions, strong spirituality. And you, in turn, can know these things and hand them on to new generations.
And, I look at how our people are living today, and I think if we could just turn back to those traditional ways, our lives would be a lot better.
As the keeper of the sacred pipe, a spiritual leader among our people, we have a great concern about the future generation. We have a lot of concerns about the cycle of life, because long ago, people used to live over 100 years. And today, that has shortened way too much. The elders are becoming elders in the early ages. And by the time they get like 70, 80 years old, they've gone into the spirit world. According to our traditional lifestyle, is that we're supposed to live 100 years or over. And today we're not making that. Our ways of life here on the earth is not good, from using a lot of foul language, people in a lot of pain, spiritually, physically, mentally.
There's many ceremonies still alive. We have our sun dances. At least the Plains tribe, anyway, as far as I know, we all have the sun dance. Perhaps it's done a little differently. And you can find those and present maybe tobacco or something to elders and find out more about it.
The commitment that people in the Sundance give, the sacrifice that they give on behalf of their families. I think that a family member in a Sundance involves the entire extended family. And so we see people saying, well, my auntie went into the Sundance because she was devoted to, the health and well-being of her niece or nephew who's been ill, or finding a new job, or having her grandchildren in a good, healthy home. And that prayer, that expression and that commitment of prayer is very powerful. I think that it focuses the whole family on that purpose of prayer. The various gifts that they can have while they're in the Sundance Lodge, like the cattails and the mint and the sage. And people go in big family groups to bring those things. And so it's a very important thing.
We pray for the tribe, we pray for our country. Those prayers are really offered for the whole world, and like I said, for the whole universe, for the whole tribe, for all Indian people. We pray for the water because it's so sacred to our people, so sacred to us. We pray for everything.
In Native people's world, there's always a tribe. There's always a tribe somewhere that is praying for the livelihood of the people, for their crops, for the year, for their harvesting, their hunting, for the sickness. And everybody is dancing and praying these things. And that's exactly what we do at our wintertime ceremonies. Praying for this year, that we'll have a successful year. So at the Sundance, they're carrying on a heavy load, carrying on some responsibility for their people, for themselves, for their people. And they're sacrificing these 3 days for that. And exactly what our people do. And so in every tribe there is a ceremony that is being held for each season, so that it doesn't mean that just one tribe is carrying all the load for all the people. So everyone has a time when they're praying for the world in general.
In our American Indian communities, our children are surrounded by wonderful resources. Right in your own home, sometimes, there are people who know a great deal about our very own tribes, about our land, the language, about traditions that are so important to learn about, ways of living that have brought our people thousands of years. I guess when I talk to my nieces and nephews and my grandchildren, I say, be daring, turn the TV off, take a couple of days break from the cable TV, and listen to your elders.
We do have to live in today's world. We do have to learn the way that things work in today's world. But I don't think that we need to take the attitude of out with the old and in with the new. I think that we need to hold on to the old and we need to learn the new. And I think that's important for our people. And my advice to anybody would be to do that, to hold on to the good things, to the old things that our people have taught, that have passed down for generations, and that the Creator has taught to our people.
Sinbu, he said over 100 years ago, he said, take the good and leave the bad, which he would say to the people that no, you learn to go to school and get educated. We need to balance ourselves today, through education, either going to school or through our traditional way of life. What we say is that no, the mind, the body, the spirit can bring the wholeness, and that's what we believe in. That's why the language is important to learn. At least speak some language or some words in your language.
I've lived in two worlds, so to speak. Traditional co-Indian way, I dance, sing, and go to ceremonials and all those things. And at the same time, I live like a modern American, gone to several colleges, had good jobs, but I can mix the two, blend it too, get the best from each and enjoy life that way. And if I were to give advice to these young growing co-Indian boys and girls, I would tell them, never forget the old tribal ways. Use them. Use a good one. And also, of course, go to school, get a good education, and be able to compete in the white man's world in finding jobs and following a profession. You can blend the two, enjoy a good bicultural way. And that can be done. That would be my advice to these young kids. And they're doing it now.
What is paramount is attaining an education as we from the educational system, from wherever we live. In my case, here in Saskatchewan, the educational system is all in the English language. So a person can make a living. They teach how to make a living. But to know how to live is what I'm talking about, learning our traditional background as First Nations people. There we learn how to live. But to make a living, we need that education because times have changed now. And that is important.
I came through it's kind of a poor education system, and that the images of who I was were not very good at all. A lot of those things are changing. So, I always feel that it's important to learn from the walking encyclopedias and the walking museums and the people around you. Pick their brains, get to know their hearts and their souls, and also read, and see films, do all that kind of stuff. Always keeping in touch with that inner heart, which is your inner mind.
So you need to work out, you need to eat good, healthy food, you need to take care of your mind, and the way you do that is by studying. Even if you're not in school, you can read books, and there's a lot you can learn from books. And there's also a lot you can learn from speaking with your elders. If you're in a situation where they are available to you, begin to respect them because they have a lot of wisdom, and they have the solution for us in terms of how to deal with this society. And at the same time, you can be a member of this American society because you are an American, but on the other hand, you're also Native, and you can be a part of your Native culture, and there are ways of doing that, and like I said, one of the most important is by trying to learn the language.
Our sacred way of life here is not good. From a lot of different sicknesses, viruses, a lot of anger, hatred, a lot of foul language in our homes. And everything that we eat, the way we live in this very fast world, it's affecting us. But our ceremonies, our songs and our prayers, it's about life. It's about how sacred things are, and trying to live a beautiful, sacred way of life.
Another part of advice that I would make is that There are so many ways in which our lives are filled with temptation to do dangerous things, to put our lives at risk. Drugs and alcohol and gambling, those things that are really harmful to each individual that's involved with them or in our community as a whole. While there are temptations, there are ways to say no to all of that, to enjoy our culture, its music and its dance.
The powwow is doing that. It's a vehicle that's keeping these kids Indian. And of course they go to school. So during the cold fair, you'll see the little kids all dressed up, dancing, parading on horses, going back to the Indian way, enjoy themselves. Now they're put their Indian costumes away and they're going to school now. So they're doing it. And I'm glad to see that they're hanging on.
There's a huge out of doors in almost all Indian country. Find out about our sacred places, where the battles were fought, where special events happened. The land is a beautiful place to be, and there's so much of our nature to partake in. Become involved in ceremonies. Know where the elders are. And be involved in prayer, in spiritual ways. These are the things that our Creator and our elders have given us that make us strong.
So what I'm saying to you is take the time to be quiet and be by yourself and reflect on what your gifts are. Because there are two ways to go. You can go the good way and live in harmony with nature, which is what our ancestors have always done, or you can go the other way and end up in prison. Because you didn't follow the good path, you followed the wrong path. And sometimes it seems as though it's easier to go the wrong path because there are things out there that make me feel good, but it's only temporary. That kind of stuff doesn't make you feel good in your life. And what you need is to figure out, what are the things that make me feel good? One of the things that makes you feel good is to get out into nature. Go walking, go hiking, go swimming in the ocean or wherever you live, in a river or a lake. Experience the beauty of America. Experience how America is such a sacred place. Everywhere you go in this land, our people have been there and they have said, this place is sacred. You know, we have to go back to that. And the way we experience that is by being in the natural world. Spend time hiking, walking, swimming, the things in the natural world, and recognize that our elders have always told us that we're connected to the natural world, that we have an obligation to it, to protect it.
As an Indian young person, you know that there's an identity just waiting for you to take up. For example, if you think of the warrior tradition, they sought direction and vision, a very, very intimate relationship with the Creator in the vision quests and through the sun dance and in the sweat lodges. All of those ways of spiritual expression, all that spiritual life exists today.
I would tell youth or anybody that needed that help, that by turning back to our traditional ways, by turning back to the things that the Creator has blessed us, that we can find all the answers to all of the problems that we have and that we face today, all the challenges that we face today.
Those would be the things that I would say, the warrior ways, the richness of music and dance, the access to spiritual expression in our communities, all of those things and the values of American Indian living, those are what make an American Indian person who they are.